Hi everyone, welcome to Miss Adams Teaches Poetry. This video is in response to one of the Year 11s who's currently revising for their exams and asked if I could make a video that went through all of the poems in the Time and Place collection in one go, but with a focus on form, because obviously that's going to really help you with that kind of high level analysis. So for this video, grab yourself some flashcards because each slide will have one poem. I'm doing them in order and I will just quickly go through 2 or 3 things that you can say about the form, and most importantly, why, what the effect is. Because there's no point talking about form unless you can explain what the writer was intending to do with it. So without further ado, let's get started because there is a lot to get through. Okay, let's start with the first poem of the collection, To Autumn, by John Keats. So this is what we call an ode, which is a sort of a celebration. It's pledging a poem to a particular kind of concept. In this case, it is the season of autumn. So what we have here, it's largely in iambic pentameter, but we do have some moments where that's broken and the rhythm is slightly shifted. Now, what's really useful about this poem is because Keats wrote a number of odes, you can see some variations in this one compared to the others. So most of his odes were 5 stanzas-ish, 5 to 8 stanzas long, and they all had 10 lines. Now this one is much shorter. It's only got 3 stanzas, but at the same time, they're 11 lines long. We've got a bit of a varied rhyme scheme. So ABAB is always the first kind of setup of each stanza, and then there's nice variation in the last sort of section of each stanza. So why these changes? Why these shifts? I would say that one of the reasons that this poem has more in the way of lines, so 11 rather than 10, is because this is a poem about how autumn gives us such plenitude, more than perhaps is expected. So he gives us more than it's expected from each stanza. But you might say, Miss Adams, well, why are there only 3 rather than 5 stanzas if it's about plenitude? Well, the answer there is this poem is also about death. It's also about cycles of life, the circle of life, and the brevity of life. So he's making a point about how short life can be. So he makes the stanzas, the number of stanzas, fewer. Isn't that clever? Next poem. Easy one, composed upon Westminster Bridge. On your flashcards, write down this phrase, Petrarchan sonnet. There are lots of different kinds of sonnets. This one is Petrarchan. You can tell because obviously it's got its usual 14 lines, but it's split out into an octave and a sestet. That means 8 lines followed by 6 lines. And what happens on that 9th line, so the beginning of the sestet, is we get a volta, which is where you get this kind of dramatic shift in tone. Now, what are you going to write about this? You're going to write about the fact that Petrarchan sonnets are forms associated with love poetry. You're going to smash in some context as well, because you're going to say, oh, isn't it interesting that Wordsworth was writing what is essentially a love poem about a city when he was a romantic poet, and he should hate the city and industrialization. He should love nature. You're going to sit it in even more context, and you're going to say, it's because he was looking at London first thing in the morning when it was its most natural, its most beautiful, because the factories hadn't opened, and that's why he uses Petrarchan sonnet form. Boom. Right, third one, London. Brilliant one, this one. So what we've got is we've got 4 quatrains, so that's lines of 4. We have an ABAB rhyme scheme, which is pretty much regular throughout the whole thing. It is written in iambic tetrameter for the most part, but we do have the odd shift where he uses anapes. So anapes is where you have sort of like 2 short syllables and then the stress on the third. So here, this is iambic tetrameter. I wander through each charted street where the charted Thames does flow. So the beat is on the 2nd syllable, like a heartbeat, and you've got 7 or 8 syllables in each line. But then here, we've got anapests. How the chimney sweepers cry, every blackening church appalls. And that's putting a little bit more special focus on these ideas, these images of the chimney sweeper and the corrupt church. You can notice I'm not sure that I buy into this one. I don't know whether he did it deliberately or whether it's just a coincidence, but you could say that the third stanza is acrostic because look, it says here down the lines. Not sure about that one, but what I definitely would say is that the rigidity of the poem and the form of the poem, the fact that it's in these strict quatrains with the strict regular rhyme scheme, is all about representing the rigidity and the control of the city, which he is criticising. Another interpretation is that he uses the AB rhyme scheme because that's quite a positive sing-song kind of rhythm, and he's using that to kind of contrast the suffering of the people. I started early, took my dog, fourth poem. Oh, this one's amazing. So it's a lyric poem, or you could call it a ballad. Both are about the fact that the poem sounds quite song-like. This is created through its rhythm and rhyme. So we've got an AB rhyme scheme the whole way through. There are 6 quatrains, and it shifts between iambic tetrameter and iambic trimeter. So I started early, took my dog. There's my tetrameter. And visited the sea. There's my trimeter, okay? And it does that the whole way through. You can, of course, comment on the fact that she's got all of these little hyphens everywhere, but just so you know, that's a real Emily Dickinson thing. It's not just for this poem, so it's something that she did. It might have even been to do with her handwriting. But here is the sprinkle of gold dust. Yes, it's a ballad. Yes, it's got this very, very kind of strict iambic tetrameter, iambic trimeter rhythm. Guess what it sounds like? She uses the exact same rhythm as, or exact same meter as the hymn Amazing Grace. What a cool woman in this time period to be writing a song about journeys and sexual awakening and becoming a woman and all of these ideas to the rhythm of a hymn. Where the picnic was. Okay, I'm going to calm down because this is a sad one. This is an elegy. Okay, so this is a poem that is used to write about someone who has died. So it's very, very mournful in tone, and in some way it will be very kind of respectful of the poem, that the subject that the poet is talking about. We've got 3 stanzas. It's all unequal length. We've got irregular rhyme scheme. We've got an irregular meter. That's not to say that there aren't moments of rhyme, but you just can't rely on it. We got loads of enjambment. Okay, why is the question? So the elegy, simple, because it's about his wife Emma who died. So it makes total sense that he is. In fact, this is one of a series of elegies that he wrote in his 1912 collection, and they're all about Emma. But all of the kind of irregularity, I think this is really, really kind of mimetic of his feelings of grief and the kind of unexpected ways that he feels. And you'll notice that there are moments where the enjambment kind of slows things down, and it almost mirrors his emotions. Like, look at this bit, you know, hill to the sea, I slowly climb through winter mire. Those elongated sounds as well help that out. Okay, nice one, easy one. Adlestrop, which I was calling Adlestrop, and then I realised I was saying it wrong. So we've got 4 quatrains. It's an ABCB rhyme scheme. It's largely iambic tetrameter, but you do get the odd little shift. But what we do have is loads of enjambment and caesura, which actually kind of breaks the rhythm of the poem a little bit. So some of that enjambment and caesura is used very deliberately to represent moments in the poem. So, for example, the way that the train appeared so unexpectedly, that's what unwantedly means. And then look, we get caesura in the middle of the line and the enjambment coming onto unwantedly. So you've got this sort of like stop-start that's being created. And again, this idea of regularity and irregularity, I think, is really important, because this is about the poet kind of having this moment in time, this kind of unexpected moment where he gets to sort of live in this peace, which is obviously really profound, because this is just before the war begins, and you know, he used poetry a lot to kind of help himself kind of cope with the horrors of going to war, because he really didn't want to enlist. So some quite specific stuff there on form. Home Thoughts from Abroad, my least favourite poem of the collection, but there's good stuff to say about form, so that's something. Okay, this is what we call a lyric poem, so it's very, very musical in nature. Yeah, that's right, it's got 2 stanzas, but it is full of metrical irregularity. We have anapestic rhythms, we've got trochaic rhythms, we shift around between trimeter, tetrameter, pentameter. It's all over the shop, and the rhyme scheme is irregular as well. So what the heckety heck are you going to do with that? You're going to relate the building of the rhythm, the increase in meter, and almost a seeming spontaneity of the different rhythms, this shift between trochaic and anapestic. This is all about his emotional tenor. It's all about him getting super excited about the idea of nature at home. Okay, so the first stanza is a perfect way of looking at it. And with the increasing meter, of course, there is the line length, more syllables, longer lines. So that one's nice and easy. First flight. Oh, love this one. Easy to talk about as well for form. Clearly it's free verse. Yeah. Fanthorpe is doing whatever the heck she likes. And with that free verse, we get this spectacular dual narrative. And we've got so much on Jumpamont because the dual narrative actually interrupts moments of enjambment across lines. I mean, look at this. If we weren't reading the interrupted there, it would go, the experienced solidly read Guardians, discuss secretaries, business lunches. But we've got this jarring interruption of the second narrative. This is a rather short hop for me. And the fact that those second narratives keep interrupting the thought process of the first narrator is really indicative of the character of that second narrator. Quite pompous, a bit of a know-it-all. And the contrast between the sort of profound nature of the first narrative and the sort of know-it-all and the kind of mundane and triviality of the second narrator obviously emphasizes the profound message, which is, yikes, are we playing God? Are we pushing the boundaries by creating these metal birds that we fly around in? Love that poem. Cracking one. Stuart Island. Yes, it's in free verse. It starts with dialogue. How crazy. And there is so much enjambment and caesura all over the shop. And this is the poem that so many people say to me, it doesn't even sound like a poem, miss, it just sounds like a conversation. Yes, that's right. That's what the poet was trying to do, because she's trying to get across the idea that she's talking to you directly about her personal experiences and feelings, okay? And also the use of the free verse creates quite a ranting tone, which suits the style of this particular narrator and narrative voice. Tick, done, easy. Presents from my aunt in Pakistan. Again, it's super easy to talk about form. Just look at it and you can see that it's in free verse. Clearly it's in free verse, but it's also fragmented in its lines in terms of their starting points. Loads of varied stanza and line lengths, but the thing that you really want to focus on is all of this, like tabbing is what you would do if you were typing it out, you know, as those close. So that enjambment starts in the middle of the line, just where this bit is. And this is all about the notion of being or feeling disjointed, feeling fragmented, which is representative of the narrator, who is, in this case, the poet herself, feeling like she doesn't quite fit. No matter where she is, she can't quite kind of get her sense of cultural identity to kind of sit comfortably within like both boundaries, both England and Pakistan. And that is why the poem is like, I know you can't say that in a essay, so say fragmented lines, disjointed lines. Hurricane hits England. Lovely Grace Nichols. It's another marvellous free verse poem, which makes perfect sense for the content of this. There are even little moments where she seems to be like playing around with like shape. This stanza here. Whenever I teach this, everyone goes, miss, I think you're reading a bit much into this. Maybe I am, but I think it's cracking. It looks like lightning, which is what this is. The blinding illumination, even as you short circuit us into further darkness. She's talking about lightning, you know, breaking short circuiting us and getting rid of all of the light, plunging you into darkness. And the line looks like a lightning bolt. If you don't like that, then you can just look at the way that, for example, the line short circuit is split across the two. Clever, clever, clever enjambment there. Why, though, specifically the free verse and the variation, you know, like, for example, having this one little line on its own? Well, Again, this is about the kind of unpredictability of storms and her feelings, and this sort of unexpected kind of response to an unexpected storm. So it makes sense that there is nothing predictable in the way she's setting out her poem. It's a kind of presentation of the unpredictability of storms and life and feelings. Nothing's changed. It's another free verse. It's got 7 stanzas. They're all of unequal length, kind of similar to the one before, including these little dinkety-linkety ones here. Loads of enjambment, and we've got a cyclical structure because the title of the poem is Nothing's Changed. The last line of the poem is Nothing's Changed. Cyclical structure. Funny that, nothing changes. It's the same at the beginning and the end. So that's your easy high money form point there. But like Stuart Island, you can also talk about the fact that the free verse makes it sound ranting and angry, which suits the narrator, who also happens to be the writer, Tatum Kulu Africa. Ooh, sorry, I'm zooming through these. Postcard from a Travel Snob, Sophie Hannah. So this is great in terms of form, because what she's doing is she's subverting the conventions of postcards. Okay, so, you know, opening a postcard with "I wish you were here," she goes, "I don't wish that anyone was here." So nice little subversion there. We've got 4 quatrains, we've got an ABAB rhyme scheme, but when you read it, the enjambment and the caesura stops you from reading it in that ABAB rhyme scheme. It's another angry poem that comes across in this sort of, so that break from the rhyme scheme sort of creates that ranting voice one more time. So lots of lovely enjambment as well. And sometimes there's like, the enjambment creates like a little bit of irony, or a little bit, you know, poking a little bit of fun with a bit of humour, like this one. I'm sleeping in a local farmer's van, caesura, enjambment. It's great. Is it now? Romney. Lovely, sad, beautiful Romney. This is another lyric poem. It has that kind of musical element to it, but it's sometimes described as a landscape poem, which we don't sort of use that term that much anymore, but it's a sort of celebration of a kind of pastoral scene, which of course this is. We've got an ABAB rhyme scheme, 7 quatrains, and it's iambic tetrameter. That rhythm is held quite firmly. And that's for a couple of reasons, because you've got this sort of motion, you know, A, B, all the way through, nice and regular. And that suits 2 parts of the poem. We've got the fact that this is a journey going from A to B, you know, because he goes down to Dymchurch Wall and then he goes back up. But you've also got the kind of notion of the water and the sounds of the waves as well. And so I think sometimes you could say that rhythm is quite mimetic of the sounds of the waves crashing, regular but powerful. So that's a nice little point. And then last but in no way least, we have Absence. Good old Elizabeth Jennings. So this is another lyric poem. We've got 3 quintets. We're in ABAB rhyme scheme. It's iambic pentameter, so it's nice and, you know. But what we do have is elements that break the rhythm, and that's because of enjambment, and that's also because, to a degree, of like half rhymes as well. So this is a poem about the kind of realization of feelings, the grief and the pain and the anger that has been kept inside coming to the surface. So it makes sense that the first part of the poem sits in that rhyme scheme and that rhythm quite nicely, and then it's in the second stanza, when she's starting to question her feelings of grief, that you get this sort of break, you know, with this enjambment here that caesura here, and then enjambment here, that stops you reading it in the rhyme scheme. And then obviously the final stanza is like the big moment of realization, and that's where we get like the half rhyme between savage force and grass. But it's more in the kind of breakdown of the rhyme scheme that I think it's more important, because it's that sort of breakdown of feelings. You know, fountains, bird and grass were shaken by my thinking of your name. I love that poem. That's it from me. I'm aware that that was an absolute whirlwind, so you may need to have like paused me and like gone back, because I flew through those. But hopefully that was helpful to you all, as well as to the individual who asked me to make that video, fingers crossed, you should have flashcards that are brimming with information. Give me a shout if you've got any questions about anything that I mentioned on the video. Otherwise, I will leave you to it. Thanks again. Happy revising.